Thank you very much, Jonathan, and welcome back. Marshall, thank you for joining us in this broadcast. You became interested in matters environment and climate crisis at quite a young age, so much so you took a course in permaculture. Can you talk to us about that?
So, I live just outside Cape Town in a beautiful town, Greyton, picturesque, just under the foot of the mountain, where as kids we used to enjoy the beautiful environment, beautiful waterfalls and mountains, and that's where my love actually came from. But I was always worried about how can I preserve this environment, how can I preserve this beautiful area of mine. And that's when I started thinking on a young age, what can I do when I'm a teenager or a young adult? And I started thinking already in terms of conservation, that mindset, how can I preserve this environment for my kids and their kids to see. So from a young age, as I said, used to play in the mountains, and that brought a big connection personally for myself. And also a lot has been passed on from my grandfather about nature and environment and medicine. So that's very close to me. But obviously the question always says, how can you preserve that? How can you conserve that? So that was always my thing. And as a teenager, I always invested my time in looking at various ways on how to conserve this. I joined the local conservation on an age probably of 17, 18 years old, and I'm still on it. So that was my foot in the door to protect and conserve our local fauna and flora and our environment for our kids and other kids in our area as well.
In fact, talking to that, you spend a lot of time teaching children about the environment. Why do you think that's critical?
I think it's very important. As adults, adults are set in their ways. They're not going to change. I think it's very vital all over the world, South Africa, to spend your time and energy on teenagers or kids. They're still young. It's better to catch them now to bring a better mindset for them, looking to the environment in different eyes. So I think it's important because they're going to be, in the next 5 or 10 years, they will be the adults, they'll be the business people, they'll be the leaders of tomorrow. So how best to invest time with them to endure the environment so they can have a much better perspective how to look after it. So I find it fascinating. I absolutely love working with kids. We work in school time with them and after school. So I think it's very vital that we bring them up in a much different world as how we were brought up. Yeah.
Now, you've been involved with this game since you were a young teen, really, and you continue to teach children. It makes sense then for you to become a climate reality leader, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I became one in 2014, which is very excited. Met with some different environmentalists all over the world, had a chance to see Al Gore live, sharing some global issues, sharing some stories, and just becoming a climate reality leader brought forth a different perspective for me, what's happening globally. But I came back with a sense of what are we going to do locally for what's happening globally. So that's kind of where my story is, of locally, on the ground, in my hometown, in your immediate environment. What are we going to do locally for our global issues? So that's where it all became with the whole climate leader, and that brought a lot of resources in terms of PowerPoint and information on globally to make people aware locally this is happening. We might not see it physically in South Africa, but if you show people what's happening all over the world, they get a much better perspective. They endure much more what they have. So I think it's fantastic that came to South Africa, and myself could have been part of that, yeah.
In fact, you alluded to it earlier. You live in a very unique town that is very focused on self-sufficiency, and you are the director of your transition town, as it's called, which is one of about 4,000 around the world. What is it all about? What does it involve?
Greyton Transition Town is one of the only transition towns in Africa, not just in South Africa. It's basically something that started in Tottenham in England by a guy called Rob Hopkins, and my chairperson of this NGO, she's from England, and she kind of brought the idea to South Africa. But because we're such a small town, we kind of piloted, and the whole idea is to kind of localize stuff, to invest time in environmental education, food security, waste management, renewable energy. So that's kind of our main focuses in our NGO that we're busy with. And the whole idea is not to depend on too much stuff that's imported, but localizing our food, looking for a local currency so we don't depend too much on the system and other imported goods. So that's the whole idea of the movement. And it's a worldwide movement. It's all connected. All our stuff is open sourced. So we get supported from other towns as well. And the stuff that we do, we support other towns as well at the same time.
What have you found to be the greatest challenge in educating adults? I mean, children are much more fun to work with in this space. But
Definitely.
adults, to get them to change their behaviors is quite a lot of work. What are some of those challenges? What have they been, rather?
I think the main one, I would say, is their mindset. I think the mindset is because the mind is so powerful. If you change your mindset, anything is possible. So I think the most difficult part is with adults is changing their mindset, their habits. That goes with, so your mindset goes with your habits and what you're used to. So I think that's the difficulty of someone of adulthood to change, to come in and educate them about something different. Obviously, people don't like changing, but that's why I absolutely love rather investing my time into children, young teenagers that can still absorb all this knowledge and information and go forward with that.
Yeah, teaching an old dog new tricks and all of that.
Exactly.
Were there any key moments in your life that really reinforced the work that you're doing now?
I think for me, a highlight is always when a parent comes to me in a shop or somewhere local, comes to me up and say, thank you so much for teaching my kid what he knows today about the environment, about recycling, about food security. I think that for me is a very, that's a highlight for me always for someone as a parent and even teachers, even headmasters, comes to me and say, Marshall, thank you so much for what you're doing for our kids. It changes their perspective, it's changing their behavior. It gets bullying down in school. They swear less, so they're much more humane to each other because they get in touch with the environment much more. So I think that for me is definitely a highlight. I get the sense that I am definitely doing something right in a way.
You are indeed. Final question from me, Marshall. South Africa is a leading economy on the African continent. And as far as innovation and thinking around renewable energy, I'd like to think we are a leader in Africa. How can we continue playing a leading role in this space in Africa?
I think South Africa are very on a very good scale for renewable energy in terms of solar and wind. I mean, we are amongst the top 5 countries in the world for solar. So I think that's definitely something that we can actually lead the way into. It is happening more and more, which is fantastic. I mean, 5-10 years ago, it was very difficult to start the conversation with anyone. But what's fantastic is that it's happening all over. And what's nice is it's happening on smaller scales. Rather than bigger scales, there's nice homemade little solar and smaller for families, which is nice. So I think in that perspective, South Africa can definitely lead the way in the renewable energy, solar and wind.
Marshall, thank you very much for joining us in this broadcast.